Hello, welcome to Truth Talk. We're going to do part two of where is the outrage? What's going on in our communities and why are some things covered and some things are not? And what is our response to the atrocities going on in our nation? We're going to continue our conversation about the relationship between Black men and white cops. But we're not going to look at it again from a perspective of hate, racism, or organizations that we want to back up to see how we can get involved. We're going to look at it from a place of reason. Because to say it's just racism, well, that's just preposterous. It diminishes the role that we all play. And to deny that there's actually people that prosper off of keeping this going, well, that's just irresponsible of us. So we want to find out, what about the other crimes against sections of society? What about all the killings and the missing children? What about the child sex trafficking? We don't look at that. We don't see that on mainstream media. We don't see riots. We don't see any kind of protest going on to protect our children. Why is that? Because to me, they are much more vulnerable than any person driving in a car. But first, let's introduce our panel today. Our panel today is Bill Coffman joining us again. Thank you.
Hello.
And Bonnie Traylor and David William Buckland. So before we begin, I was studying this week and I came across this verse. Some people might actually know it already by heart, but I'll have it up here so you can read along because it's kind of lengthy. And it's Habakkuk 1, 2 to 4. And it says, "How long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore, the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous so that justice is perverted." Well, I'm going to tell you what, if there's ever a time in our society where this scripture, what Habakkuk felt and understood in this scripture, it's today, isn't it, guys? Like, that's what we're looking at. There's wickedness everywhere. The law is actually paralyzed in most cases, and we can't do anything about it. But what we have to realize is, just like Habakkuk, he didn't just cry out to God and say, "Why aren't you doing anything?" He actually positioned himself to listen and hear what God had to say, to see what God was going to do in that society, in those areas. And he also was ready to hear a rebuke of himself from God. I think sometimes we don't want to hear God tell us we are part of the solution or part of the problem and how to fix it. We just want God to fix it. So, let's seek him, be willing to hear him and see what we got to say. Bill, what were you saying?
I was just going to say, putting him in historical context when he lived in the late 600s, I believe, early 700s BC. That's when Habakkuk was alive. So he was around when the northern and southern tribes of Israel were still there. And there was all kind of problems, and the Assyrians came down and they took the northern 10 tribes away, and they've never really completely come back. The southern 2 tribes of Judah and Benjamin, they remained. Babylon took them away a few years later for 70 years, but then they came back, rebuilt the temple. Jesus comes through that line. But historically, when you're talking about Habakkuk, he lived in a time after David and after Solomon, but before Daniel. And so probably shortly after Elisha and Elijah, that kind of time frame. So it's just interesting to put him in the concept of what was going on. And he's like, what is going on? Why are all the problems going on? But in the book, it says why the problems are going on. Then it even gives the solution.
Yes, and that's what we need to look at, because we can't just say, hey, this is crazy, what's going on in the world, but we're not looking at our part in it. We're not looking at how society aided it, how God is answering some of our own actions. We don't want to look at any of that. And we certainly don't want to listen for God to tell us what's wrong. And that reminds me of something, Bill, that is always brought up when we talk, and that is that, just like, Habakkuk was ready and positioned to hear God have a different, word than what he wanted. These days, this society, we're not positioning to hear anybody else's point of view, more or less God's, but not anyone in human form. We want, if you agree with us, great. If you don't, get out of my way. I don't need you in my life. We close the doors. We don't want to hear anyone else's viewpoint. And that's something that's I guess it's been around like that, but not like it is now. I think it's a new way that people are reacting to people. If you don't do it my way, you're just shunned. It's you're blocked and you're deleted. And go ahead and speak about that.
Melanie, I would say that historically, because that's what I like. I just like history. That's my main thing, is just reading that stuff. I read history books for fun. That's very boring, and I understand that's just the way it is, but I like it. But history of mankind now, that's normal. It isn't normal in the 20th century. All right. Through most of the 20th century, you were supposed, in the Western world anyway, it was lauded. It was a good thing to be able to discuss things with people who disagreed with you and have a kind dissertation between you. Even it was said, when I went to college back in the 80s, you were supposed to be able to argue your opponent's view effectively. Otherwise, you didn't understand your opponent's view. That is nothing that's going on today. We have gone back to the old style of the rest of the world, by the way, through all history, which is we will rule this by destroying our enemy. It was really the 20th century is the first time that any army defeated another army and didn't take all their stuff. Actually rebuilt their countries. I mean, that just never happened before. But it looks like it may never happen again if we keep going down this route, because now you're either on our side or we want to destroy you. Cancel culture is what it's called in the common media term, but it's really strange. It is. I don't agree with a lot of things people do, but I don't want to cancel them. I want to listen to them.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't have to agree with them.
It used to be that, you went to school or college, high school, whatever, and you had debate teams and you learned how to healthily debate one another. And like you said, see each other's point of view from someone else's side. You can't debate anybody now. They will, the anger that's inside everybody is so volatile that you just need to walk away. Bonnie, what were you saying?
There's a famous quote that we used to hear a lot, and I haven't heard it in a long time. And I don't know who we can attribute it to, because that's kind of for debate. But the quote was, "I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it."
Right. Yeah.
And I used to hear that often when I was younger, but I don't hear young people quoting it anymore today. And I think you're right, Bill. Cancel culture is toxic. And, I'm fortunate. I have a number of friends who are on, various sides of the political spectrum. And I really do enjoy discussing. We don't discuss candidates per se, we discuss issues. Like, okay, what do you think about, say, the death penalty? Or what do you think about, the budget, the deficit? What do you think about that? What's the right way to handle that? And it seems to me we've lost that ability in our culture to discuss topics when we spend so much time discussing gossip or people rather than looking at the real issues like we should be, and then looking to the Bible to say, okay, on each of these things, what does the Bible say? and considering the whole testament of scripture too, not just one verse here or one verse there. Sometimes that's a very complex um, question to answer as well. The Old Testament and New Testament differ a little bit. Even, some of the prophets you might throw in. It's a little tricky, and it's useful. The history of the Jews especially loved a good theological discussion, and everybody gained from it. Iron sharpens iron. And that causes a few little sparks, and we shouldn't be afraid of those little sparks, but we shouldn't have whole fires, all consuming, rage over a discussion. I don't.
Yeah. I like the fact that you said, you talk about issues, but not about the actual candidates. But I remember a time when you could talk about the candidates and you can say, hey, I voted for Clinton, or I voted for Trump, or I voted for Reagan, or I voted for Carter, whoever. And there was no backlash, either way. It was like, oh, really? Why? And you were curious about why they would vote. Or you said, you're crazy. What? You did what? But it wasn't like, you're out of your mind. Don't talk to me and I hate you. It wasn't like, don't come over for family dinner anymore. Like there's literally families that are being divided because of this. Just because someone told me, don't tell me who you're voting for, because you vote for the wrong person, I can't talk to you again. She told me that this week. And I thought, what? Yeah. You can't talk to me ever again if I don't vote for who you're voting for? She said, yeah, don't tell me who you're voting for. Don't ever mention it, because I will never be able to talk to you again. And she was serious. What is that about, guys? We have to go to
people who have even used their own. They're telling me that, hey, my kids are like, you vote my way or you won't see the grandkids. I've never heard of it.
No.
I have never in my life heard of such a thing.
Voting did not have that much power. And while this is not a political show tonight, so we're going to talk about that in future times, the political avenue and aspect of things. But we have to take a small commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion that some of you might like, some of you might not like.
Live streaming on social media is the best new way to interact and bond with your community. Do you love to encourage, motivate, and empower others, but you do not know how? Well, your opportunity starts with us on social media shows.
By the way, it was my dad.
You have 20 shows a week live streamed across the globe.
I'm just kidding. He did.
No, it can't be your dad. Your dad has grandkids?
No. My dad was in World War II, and when I was a little kid, the hippies were burning the flag.
So let's bring
I was
the
a little
community
kid,
together.
but it really made me mad. And my dad actually said those words, although he did it with his Navy.
We've
slang.
reached the age of live streaming,
but I can still remember
on social
like,
media
hey,
shows.
I hate what they're saying,
You may ask,
but I
we
got to
already have
defend
a
their right to say
so
whatever they
why
want
do
to
you
say.
need to advertise with
Otherwise,
us?
it's not free.
Well, only 8% of the businesses
Yes.
in the U.S.
I never
using digital advertising to
remember my
grow their
dad saying.
business.
So when you were saying,
That's
I go,
2 percentage
well, I know
points
who
short
I
of reaching
was
critical
talking
mass,
about.
which will lead to faster results. You have 20 plus shows with a reach of over 80,000.
Oh,
give you commercial
Some people say
ads,
Voltaire,
website link, and
but
connections to
then they haven't
nonprofit
attributed it.
organizations. So
I
get your
can't see
brand ready
that
for
because
digital
of the time frame
monetization.
in France.
We are
I
looking
can't see
for
it.
sponsors.
Could be, but I can't see it.
Which will bring more
They didn't have
traffic
free
to your
speech.
business and
I got a
ultimately
comment.
mean
Somebody said, Bonnie
the
is eloquent
world
tonight.
in quote.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Welcome back from our short commercial break. Last week, we talked about the fear that white society in general have about Black men. There's no better way to say it, no right or wrong way to say it. That's just the way it is. We talked about how it's cultivated by the media, by social media, by organizations that are for white only and for Black only, as well as the Black community itself. Tonight, we want to talk about the reverse of it. What's it like for a Black man today to get stopped by a cop who is Caucasian? Because last week we talked about how the cop, seeing the Black man has all of these things in him already, maybe that's already put him on edge before he gets out of the car. He's already kind of, girded just in case something happens. He's got these previews in his mind of what could happen just by stopping him. But you also have the man who's driving the car who has those same perceptions, but in reverse. With all that we're learning about, seeing all that's happening, social media, the news media, playing videos of Black men being killed by cops, and even the erroneous videos of Black people being what seems like brutalized by cops, but you see the whole video and you realize, no, that's not a case. Those people were wrong for the way they treated and responded to the stop. So whether it's a good video, which has merit, or even the wrong videos, which are trying to incite us, it's still getting into the minds of the Black American people. So before cop gets out of the car, they're scared. They're nervous. They're sweating. They'll listen to this because I want you to talk about this. They're sweating. They reach for their phone because they want to call their mom, their dad, somebody, say, hey, I just got stopped. Can you stay on the phone with me? Those are their safety measures. But what happens is that cop, seeing in his patrol car, gets out and he sees this sweating person, this nervous person, stuttering person, reaching for something. The cop doesn't know what he's reaching for. And there you go, an explosive event about to happen. Am I right, Bill?
Yeah, you're 100% correct. But I will say that it's kind of recently, I've been a cop 20 years. And in that time, until 2020, I never cared what color anybody was. I didn't care at all. I didn't care. I mean, I never even really noticed it. I work around mostly Hispanics, the vast majority of people where I work. There are African Americans and some white people here, but there's a lot more Hispanics where I work. I never noticed it, but now I do. And I'm noticing it not only out of like, look, I don't want to ever be on CNN or NBC or Fox News some night because I had to kill somebody and only a part of the story is told. I don't want that. I don't want that at all. And so, boy, it's a rough thing. But then again, I already know that you're correct. There's people that are complete perception's reality. It's an old saying. And there's no doubt that this person completely is believing that the only reason they're getting pulled over is because they're Black. The only thing that's going to happen to them is going to be unjust. And I don't believe that, but they believe that. And so they're reacting in a certain way. I'm now on edge myself because I don't want to have something misperceived.
Right.
So I'm treating somebody differently than I probably would anybody else. And that's not good. I mean, I'm seeing this as a big, big problem. And if you remember that, I'm going to finish with this. I'll let everybody else talk. But if you remember that first week we did this, I actually said what we're doing right now is going to cause more people to die because we are dividing everybody and we're making everybody each other's enemy. And once you start believing that, you're going to react that way. And once you do, then more people are going to fight, more people are going to run, more people are going to resist, and more people are going to die, cops and civilians. And I hope I'm wrong, but that's what I'm seeing. And I think that's a problem.
Well, I don't think you're wrong because that is what we're seeing. And I'll tell you this. I lost my train of thought just then, but let me ask you guys this. Have either of you, and I'm the only Black person here tonight on the show, so I'll answer for the Black person, but have either of you had a conversation with your son about being stopped by the police and how to act, what music to play, what to look like, words to say?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. My daughter told me not too long ago, one of her bucket lists is to run from the cops. And I had a conversation, she's 15. And I was like, why would you want to do that? Now, she was listening to some music when I was talking about it. I know, because we were listening in the car. And I said, well, why do you want to do that? And she's like, well, I just want it on my bucket list. I got to run from the cops at least one time in my life. And I go, well, can I tell you why I'm against it? Because if you resist or run from the cops, they got to chase you. And if they chase you, maybe you get hurt, maybe they get hurt, maybe an innocent person gets hurt.
Yeah.
Why? What's the purpose? For your bucket list, you want to get somebody hurt, you or them or somebody else. So whatever you do, do not do this. And that was just the other day. That's my conversation with my 15-year-old.
A little bit different than what I was talking about. What I'm talking about is, and that does count as talking, but it was because of a situation that came up that you felt a need to address it. But I'm talking about a conversation that probably 99% of Black families have. And that is, you sit your son down and you tell them, when you're in a car, you don't listen to your rap music. You put on the whitest music you can play. You don't listen to it loud. Even if it is rap, you don't listen to it loud. You can listen to country music louder than you can rap music. If you get stopped, you have to say, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. You have to use your politest white voice that you ever have so that you don't irritate them. So you don't look like the thug next door. You have to separate yourself. You need a haircut. You can't wear afros. You need to wear a smaller haircut if you're a man, because afros, people, white people think you're dangerous if you have an afro. These are conversations we have with every one of our sons. If you poll 4 people on a show and they're Black, they're all going to raise their hand. Here, I'm the only one in the room that has had that conversation. I've had to have it with my son. And I will tell you, it's not for nothing, because he's a good boy. My son's a good boy. I will tell you that. He's a grown man now, but he's been pulled over. Why are you driving an Audi? You're too young to own it. Where did you steal it from? Why are you in this neighborhood? This is an all white neighborhood. Why are you here? What purpose do you have here? Well, we lived there. These are reasons he's been pulled over. He's been pulled over once for driving too fast too. I won't take that away, but he's been pulled over more times than my whole entire family has of females. He's been pulled over more times for questioning why he is where he is or what kind of car he's driving than for any speeding offense or driving offense. So we have to.
What city is that in? I'm just asking. What city?
Live streaming on social media is the best new way to interact and bond with your community. Do you love to encourage, motivate, and empower others, but you do not know how? Well, your opportunity starts with us on social media shows. We have 20 shows a week live streamed across
I
the
just
globe,
disabled it. Right.
with a reach of over 80,000 and growing.
Yes.
So you can host your own show, and you can be anything you want to be.
No.
So let's bring the community together, and let's bring the world to you. Join us now.
We're starting again. Okay. Hi, welcome back from commercial break. I understand there was a little bit of technical difficulties before the break at the last segment. I do apologize for that, but we have it fixed now, so hopefully you can come back into the conversation. We were talking about making headway to where we can come up with something, just a simple solution to give people who are afraid of being stopped. Actually, it should be regardless of who you are. If you know that you're not speeding, you know that your registration is good, there's no way that you should be flagged to stop from a cop. Why can't we initiate a call 911 and say, I'm being pulled over, this is where I'm at, this is my car, and I'm going to go to the nearest place. I'm not evading police. I'm just going somewhere safe because I don't understand why I'm being stopped. Is that something that's even doable?
Honestly,
Well,
I'm a white.
go ahead.
I think it's a catch-22, and I'd like to tell you why. Okay. I live in a fairly large city now, but I lived in LA. I can't tell you how many times I called 911 and I could not get through at all for a long time, sometimes ever. So you've got that. They see you on the phone, and it seems reasonable to me that they would be wondering what the heck you're doing. Okay. The most prescient reason that I have is just literally from just going about my daily business. I have seen traffic stops, say on a freeway overpass, on a regular road, and they're screaming bloody murder at the driver because they didn't stop right away. Now, each is an individual, and I'm not saying they all do that, but I think it falls under the subconscious idea that you're not complying if you don't stop.
Yeah.
So you could be.
But if it were enacted across all law enforcement agencies, and it was policy, or I don't want to say law because that I'm not sure we need that, but if all law enforcement agencies allowed that, then we wouldn't have that reaction, I think. But you bring up a good point with the staffing, because I've called 911 before and it took a while to get through.
That was actually going to be my point, was just the logistics of it all. And most people want to comply. Most people, I still say most people of every race, every ethnicity, every economic structure, I still get patted on the back in my uniform all the time from everybody. Not everybody loves us, but I say the majority wants to get along. They actually like we're there. But that being said, there is a certain population that doesn't and will use anything that they can. And those are our recidivative people. I mean, because same people go to jail, they get out and go back again. I don't know how that's going to work out logistically. Now, I will say that on an individual basis, anytime you don't feel safe, this happens regularly. Somebody's following me, help me. And the dispatcher gets a hold of me. And then in between is the go-between, and we decide where we're going to meet up. Because the person's following. Don't stop your car. Keep going. And Every time. I can tell you that it never happens. Well, the cop isn't going to write me for being on my cell phone, is he? They are scared for their life because their ex-boyfriend swore they were going to kill them. And their big concern right now is that I'm going to write them a ticket for being on their cell phone. Everybody asks that. And so that perception is there that we're the meanie, we're going to get them. But in all reality, that's not true as any large number. Because like we went over these numbers before, but there are 10 million arrests a year. There's only 1,000 deaths. And there's 500 white people, 300 black people, 200 Hispanics. And this is every year for 20 years. So out of 10 million arrests, it isn't like there's, 500 people getting killed every day. That's not true. And so that perception, I think, is a little skewed. Not that it never happens, because that's not true either. See, that's where I get my own children mad at me when I say things and they go, well, and they point out one difference. And I say, there's always differences because there's nothing, humans are mistakes. We make a lot of mistakes. And so
I agree.
So I don't know how that would work out logistically.
Yeah,
was my whole
logistically,
point.
I think
it's for going on.
I think it would be a nightmare, and logistically, I think, like David said, and you said, people are going to take advantage of it, and they're going to just use it as a chance to get away because the cops think they're going to go to a gas station, then they go to a gas station and they keep going. I think it's logistically a nightmare. So I don't know how to do it. I know that something needs to change. I will just address this. I know that statistically it's just a few numbers, 500 black people. I think you said 300 white people, but it's not just about murders. It's not just about the cops killing people. I taught my son this when he was 15. He's 22 now. So it was way before any of this, media storm and misinformation went on. We knew that our sons were going to be stopped, not murdered, not killed, but stopped for erroneous reasons. And if they didn't respond well or look well, they would go to jail and we'd be picking them up at a jailhouse. Most often charges got dropped, but they went to jail. And it was an event that happened in my community, meaning the Black African American community. I'm not African, I'm just Black American. More than not. And so there is a disproportionate understanding between Caucasians and Blacks of the reality of this. Numbers don't support it because they don't get reported. It does no good to report a police officer for harassment because when we have, it comes back on us. You start getting pulled out. Once you pull out of your driveway, you're getting pulled over. You get harassed even worse and on purpose. So it does no good to do that. So I can't count on numbers as much as I can count on experience from those I know personally. And it is an outweighing measure. But you're right, the media, the wrong sharing, editing of videos, it's just adding to the fear. It's adding to the chaos. So what do we do about it? Bonnie, you wanted to say something?
You touched on a couple of points, and one thing I wanted to say was I did do a little bit of reading about a month ago, just about how law enforcement doesn't keep statistics uniformly across the United States. And I think that would help, just collecting the data. I know when people tried to do research on it, they couldn't find, across all different areas of the US and different regions have different, percentage population. They couldn't find consistent data sets to even study. So that needs to be fixed. I think we have to take care of that. That's an easy fix, I think. And when those records go online, then it can be researched accurately and have less questioning about the politics or the agenda of doing the research. That's another big issue. People say, oh, well, you're reading a study by some, Reconstructionist, liberal, blah, 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 with an agenda, and I think that we dismiss the other perspective so often because of that. And
I
that's
agree with
not
you.
right.
But I want to say too, sometimes I feel like I'm taking a view here that I'm never 100%. I don't believe cops are always right at all, because we're not. We're people. We got some bad people. We got some wrong people. We got people who make mistakes, because we're human. We're just people. It's not a robot thing. In fact, we don't even all think
That's right.
alike. We don't. And just people in a uniform. But so I sometimes feel like I'm taking that side, and I don't want to do that, in the sense that I want to do what Bonnie just said. You got to really, even if somebody is telling you something, you go, well, I can dismiss that because of who did the study. No, you can't dismiss it. You need to listen to it. You, after listening, you may still disagree, but don't dismiss things. Listen. And I was trying to listen to you, I'm like listening, because I got to hear what you're saying. I have to. And if I'm not doing that, then that's a problem. And that's the answer. Although I don't know if we're going to get it. I don't know if it's going to work, but the answer is listening. That's the answer.
And we start, I think we started tonight by having a discussion where we might all not agree, but we're listening. We're being that example to be able to talk openly about things that are difficult. So, if we do our part as God calls us, then maybe it will just keep growing. But Bill, it's time for you to go. We thank you for tonight, for your time and your lovely conversation. We're going to go
leaving.
break.
I really do hate leaving, because I don't know. I really love doing this show, but I do have to go.
Yes.
Commitments, but let
me quit for a commercial break so you can escape, and we'll be back to talk about something called woke.
Live streaming on social media is the best new way to interact and bond with your community. Do you love to encourage, motivate, and empower others, but you do not know how? Well, your opportunity starts with us on social media shows. We have 20 shows a week live streamed across the globe, with a reach of over 80,000 and growing. So you can host your own show, and you can be anything you want to be. So let's bring the community together. Let's bring the world to you. Join us now. We've reached the age of live streaming on social media shows. You may ask, we're already ahead of the curve, so why do you need to advertise with us? Well, only 8% of the businesses in the US are using digital advertising to grow their business. That's 2 percentage points short of reaching critical mass, which will lead to faster results. We have 20 plus shows that reach our 80,000. We'll give you commercial ads, website link, and connections to nonprofit organizations. So get your brand ready for digital monetization, for we are looking for sponsors, which will bring more traffic to your business and ultimately mean more sales. So let's bring the world to you. Inquire now.
We've reached the age of live streaming on social media shows. We present our show programmings, which demonstrate inspirations to any viewers around the globe.
With over 500,000 reach to over 54 countries.
Our programming are very relatively entertaining and empowering. And now here is the Let's Talk World. Let's Talk World, hosted by young, witty, and fearless leader of social media shows, Maria Pureza. This program is all about featuring individuals in their field of interest. We showcase everyone's passion.
You can be empowered with Maria and Joe Live TV, a show that will inspires you. Maria and Joe will share real-time stories and deliberate cynical perspective in a positive culture. Join and watch us on socialmediashows.com.
In the Office, a show about words of wisdom that relates to everyday circumstances in life. Watch life coach Joseph Skoda every Wednesday 11 a.m. on Social Media Shows.
Fab Life is about the fashion, celebrities, movies, social events, arts and culture, and so much more. Hosted by JC Crisologo every Monday 7 p.m. on socialmediashows.com.
Shut up and sit down.
Jeezy and Frenemies. Jeezy and His Frenemies is an impromptu comedy skit with a hilarious story of a billionaire designer with other billionaire friends. Socialmediashows.com with evolving characters and actors.
Honey Bees, Women Empowerment Talk Show, hosted by powerful women. As women in our society, we have a voice. Let's talk anything that involves women.
Compassionate and beautiful.
Welcome back. Tonight's show went a little bit off course on what we were going to talk about, but I think the conversation is necessary and it's good to have. There's a show recently on Netflix called Woke. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. Have you guys heard this show? Well, I thought it was just something made up, a political, weekly show. But it actually is based on someone's true life. And what it is about this cartoonist in San Francisco. And he pretty much lost his contract because he winded up one day that accused of burglarizing someone. So he was just standing there posting up signs about his cartoon and the show that he was about to do, the event, and cops just bum rushed him because they said, in the description, it said, Mr. Knight, that's the cartoonist, said, I remember him asking what's the description. And the police officer said, 6 foot tall black male. That was it. That was enough to bum rush this guy. And this guy, they let him go. They didn't even haul him anywhere. They just let him go because I guess they realized it wasn't the guy. But he began having kind of PTSD about it. And so they call that woke. He realized he was a black man. He realized that he wasn't safe, that he was just like every other black man. He thought it couldn't happen to him. And so this show is very comedic, but it does open up the doors about that. What I find interesting in this is that it opens up a dialogue, an understanding how Black people see the world. But it's very comedic. I will just say that Mr. Knight wants everybody to laugh. He said it has some serious inquiries, but he wants others people to laugh because life is too hard for everybody, especially in this pandemic. But he talks about the issues, and he in the show and in real life, he posted a sign saying Black people for rent. What do you guys think happened when people saw signs posted all over San Francisco, Black people for rent, with a phone number? What would you do if you saw that?
I don't know. I'd kind of be horrified. I wouldn't know what to think.
Well, the alarming response is, and this is what I'm bringing up, is because the main people responded to this were Black people saying, when can I get hired? They were Black people out of jobs saying, I'm willing to rent myself, and it was for jobs like stand somewhere and be a thug to scare people away. It was like, it was the stereotypical Black man. That's what the jobs that they wanted to rent people to white Black men to white people to be that stereotype, and it's crazy that in this time frame, something like that can happen. Now, this happened years and years ago. It just got into syndication as a network with Netflix as a show, but this happened years ago. And it just shows that there really is no understanding. There's no one way to see the world. It just isn't. You have Black or white. There's confusion on both sides. We're looking like what Black person would rent themselves out, and the Black people's like, hey, I get rented out every day. I just get paid for it. So why not do it this way too? Either way, you're working. That's all they saw. They didn't see it as a negative. They saw it as work. But on the serious side, it does prove that, there is a difference between being Black in America and being white in America. There is a huge difference in being wealthy in America and being poor in America. There's a huge difference in what community you live in. I'm sure every mother and every father wants their children to live in a community that doesn't have drugs or gangs or shootings, regardless of race. They don't want that. But because of their income level, whatever, they're stuck in that situation. And that is difficult. We have to be willing to see not the actions of each other, but why they act that way. I think if we can get into that understanding that, David Buckland walks like this into a store because of this, while Bonnie walks into a store with her head down and her head covered instead of confident because of this. And that way we don't judge each other. We're not ready to accuse each other or to come against one another. We're there ready to understand the differences. One difference, major difference that is going on now in our community is what do we do with all of the killings? It's different from what you think. It's different if you're Black, it's different if you're wealthy, it's different if you're white, it's different if you're poor, it's different if you're Hispanic, it's different if you're Indian. Like this has entered into all of our systems, and it's affected all of our lives. Before we end tonight, Bonnie brought up, I wasn't able to listen to the news today, that there was a Breonna Taylor indictment today. And out of 3 officers, Bonnie, there was 2 that got no indictment, and 1 got an indictment for reckless endangerment and has a max sentence of 5 years. Now, I no way want to say that 5 years is enough for someone who killed another human. However, I have a different opinion than most people about this. But I'll let Bonnie and David talk first. You want to address, what do you think about this indictment? Is it?
Well, first of all, let's rewind a little bit, because I've been following this case especially because it seemed like for sure this was a mistake. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts that, like there's no evidence whatsoever that Breonna Taylor was any kind of criminal. She was in her own home, and she died at the hands of police. So I thought if there was going to be an indictment anywhere for her killing, it would be, with Breonna Taylor, or for a killing, I should say, it would be with Breonna Taylor. And so I'm not sure what to think. I'm surprised. I think from the point of view of the family and from her boyfriend, it seems really unfair, because the night of the shooting, the night of the event, he was taken into custody and charged with attempted murder of a police officer.
Oh.
And he was in jail. I think he spent spent some time in jail before they finally dropped the charges. And there's still a possibility that he could be arrested and they could, press charges against him. But I think the current won't. But that just seemed so unfair from just a common average layman's perspective. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, you know what, I don't know exactly what the law says. And we are a nation of laws. So in this case, obviously those facts need to be examined in light of the law. That being said, I think that what we really need to do at this point is examine the law, because it's pretty clear that the laws apply differently to, to different people with respect to officers and non-officers. I had a conversation with a friend. She and I are both kind of on the same page that we're white, but we're sort of becoming more aware of the racism in our society, and we're kind of sitting back and just listening and trying to learn. And we were talking, and why is it that you get a higher penalty if you kill a police officer than if you kill an average citizen? Is that right? And so we thought about it, like, why is that? Yeah, police officers do take on a lot of added responsibility, and maybe we should bring this up with Bill at some point in the future. But and I'm sure it seems wonderful to them and to their families, like they have a very risky job, but we don't have any kind of laws about that with respect to our military. So I think, maybe those are some questions that we need to ask, and we really need to think about, how do we want to address no-knock warrants? Can we have more training for law enforcement? Is 6 months, 8 months? Different agencies have different amounts of training. Can we require more training for our law enforcement? Can we mandate de-escalation? I think that there's a third way here, rather than anything that puts us against them is probably not good. We need to find a middle way, a way that honors Jesus, that honors the principles that he was here for, a way that honors justice, a way that honors all life as sacred. So I'm not sure what to make of the indictment.
Okay. I want to get David before I respond to some of the things you said. David, what are you? You have anything to say about this?
I'm afraid I don't. It wasn't on my radar until about 2 minutes before the show. My wife said, "Are you going through Louisville? Because I'm going on a trip soon." And I said, "Well, yeah, I am." So she was concerned about my safety, and I don't know what to say about that. But anyway, no, the only thing I've gleaned from all this, it seems to me that I would really agree with Bonnie that they need to revisit the whole structure of no-knock warrants, because just by its very nature, I would think that no-knock warrants puts the officers in a tremendous amount of danger. I mean, if they have the authority to do that, why couldn't they knock like they would for any other warrant, and then when the door is answered, say, "Okay, this is a no-knock warrant. You must let us in." Blah.
All right, David.
I don't know.
You can't knock and then say this is a no-knock warrant. That's just a regular warrant. Just to let you know, it's just a regular warrant when you do that.
I don't know how it worked, but I don't know how accurate the dramatizations are, but anyway.
My take on this, and well, I want to address, my take on this is this. The police officers that showed up for that day showed up for work. The law is no-knock warrants are to be executed without any knowledge of the people inside the building. They are to, at all costs, apprehend the people named in the warrants or that are within that structure. So the police officers showed up and did their job. I don't believe that you can show up, do your job as it is required, and then you can get arrested for doing just your job. When Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend, whoever it was that shot back because they were scared, they did what was right as well. They were woken up in the middle of the night, scared to death, didn't know who it was, what was happening, and they defended themselves, which they have a right to do. So to me, neither side of this is wrong as any of the parties involved, the people that were actually there on site. They both did what they needed to do. One to work and do their job, the other to protect his home. But yes, Bonnie, the fact that the boyfriend got arrested for attempted murder when the cops didn't get arrested for attempted murder or murder, they did the same action. Both of them shot at each other. It wasn't that the boyfriend knew they were cops. That's a whole different story. They didn't know they were cops. So there is a double standard, but I do believe I don't believe anybody should go to jail over this. I think the people who should go to jail signed the warrant. He signed, I believe it was 5 or 7 warrants in a matter of seconds. I think like 3 minutes and 42 seconds or something. He signed like seven warrants. You can't read over all that information in that limited time. There was a disregard for some of the information about that. There was no weird packages. The postman said there was nothing going on really weird in that house. That he was asked and he said, no, there's nothing going on here. There's nothing suspicious. They disregarded that. The people who should be held accountable aren't the cops who showed up for work and defended their own lives. It's not Breonna's boyfriend who defended his and her life. It is the people who signed the warrants. It's the people who didn't care enough to look at the information and make sure there was actual criminals sitting in that house. But even if there are no-knock warrants, like you said, David and Bonnie, they're just waiting for someone to get killed. It's an avenue where someone's going to get shot, someone's going to get killed. It's going to happen. And a lot of states have already stopped no-knock warrants. There's been a lot of legislation that has changed the way they do it or has banned them altogether. So there's been a lot of conversation since Breonna Taylor. There's been a lot of laws that have been changed, a lot of legislation that's been changed in the way they do this. It would be great if it was a nationwide ban on no-knock warrants, because that's the only way you're going to save lives. But I do believe that the judge should be held accountable for Breonna's death. I believe the other people who just willy-nilly said, let's just do this. Let's close out. Bonnie?
Oh, I was just going to say that I think with respect to extreme measures like that, you have to consider.
Have to go to commercial break. We'll come back and do our last segment.
Okay.
We've reached the age of live streaming on social media shows.
We've reached the age. Yes, we already have. So why do you must? One of the businesses in the U.S. are using digital advertising to grow their business. That in the U.S. are using digital advertising to grow their business. That's 2 percentage points short of reaching critical mass, which will lead to faster results. We have 20 plus shows with a reach of over 80,000. We'll give you commercial ads, website link, and connections to nonprofit organizations. So get your brand ready for digital monetization, for we are looking for sponsors, which will bring more traffic to your business and ultimately mean more sales. So let's bring the world to you. Live streaming on social media is the best new way. Do you love to encourage, motivate, and empower others, but you do not know how?
Yes, and this is the last one.
Well, your opportunity starts with us on social media shows. We have 20 shows a week live streamed across the globe with a reach of over 80,000 and growing. So you can host your own show and you can be anything you want to be. So let's bring the
When we left for a commercial break, Bonnie was in the middle of saying some very interesting things. Bonnie, can you pick it up?
Sure. I think think one of the things, particularly with no-knock warrants, I think that the weight of the crime should be considered when they're executing a no-knock warrant. I think in the case of, if you're tracking down a murderer, a rapist, a serial killer, obviously, they should be allowed to do that. But if they're executing a warrant for a drug charge, we're in a situation where it's a high potential for sure. I'm not sure as a civilized society that we need to be doing that. I'm absolutely willing to listen to the other side, and I'm sure there is one. And I think there's a lot of training that goes on in law enforcement, that there's a certain number of feet between the person and someone where they're allowed to shoot. And I don't know exactly what those are, but I think that we need to look at some of those things, and we need to have an honest discussion about it, because maybe there are good reasons that law enforcement does the things that they do. And maybe some of those things can be modified now that we have different, maybe their training can be modified now that we have different kinds of tactics, different, they have the stun guns and different kinds of things that they can do. It seems a shame that people get killed for having a taillight out. That just doesn't seem right. And I think we can look at that honestly as a society and say, okay, we can do better. We got to figure this out, because it's just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, I agree. And, there are a lot that we don't know about policing, and there's no one that hasn't gone through police academy or training that knows the reasons they do things. And so we don't take away from that. And you mentioned the question, why do police officers who get killed have a higher penalty than civilians? Well, I think they should, honestly, because they are out there, they are the law. Okay. And so if you are committing any kind of crime and you kill an officer whose job is to stop you from that crime, you should have a higher penalty than civilian, because he is putting that uniform on to say, I am the authority, and you can't kill the authority. You can't just willy-nilly just think that that's okay. I think it should be a higher penalty. I think cops, police officers, highway patrolmen, SWAT, whoever you want to call them, they all take a hefty toll of their life to defend our communities and our society. And when they go wrong, though, I think the imbalance is that when the police officer, whoever, the uniformed person, goes rogue, goes against the code, goes against their training, there should be an instant to pay, so that it's like nip it in the bud. If you want to be a rogue officer, if you want to go out of fear or out of suspicion or any of that, then you're done. You're automatically handcuffed, just like anybody else would be. I think that's the injustice, is that they're given so much time to get their story straight and to whizzle out of it and get to, union work, lawyers and all that. No, you know what? You just killed a person. You get handcuffed right then and there and deal with it like everybody else. I think that's where the injustice is that they're not held accountable the way anybody else is. And they should be held accountable even more, because they did take the oath. We can't go into this anymore today. I want to invite everybody this Sunday. We are having a fundraiser this Sunday. It's going to be live on Facebook, I believe. So look for our Instagram at Truth Talk, or at Truth to Hear, also our Facebook at Truth to Hear, and get information